Hey everyone. So this is a topic that I covered in one of my newsletters, but this is the much more expanded version. Hope you enjoy. And for more education, please subscribe. Thank you. Imagine it's the 1800s, and we are watching a courtroom proceeding that takes place in a tavern. Yes, a tavern. Or some other type of building that was used for various purposes in addition to being used for courtroom proceedings, because this is the 1800s. So here we are watching an 1800s courtroom proceeding on a black and white television. And the case in court today is about a disagreement over a contract involving the purchase of a wagon. Yes, a wagon, because again, this is the 1800s. Now, during this hypothetical proceeding, a man named Bill claims that he agreed to purchase a wagon from Sam for X amount of dollars. Now, Sam claims that he did not want to sell the wagon at all, but Bill threatened to beat him up. Yep, that's right. Bill threatened to beat Sam up. Sam refused to sell that wagon to Bill. And therefore, because Sam was afraid of getting beaten up, Sam signed a contract in which he agreed to sell the wagon to Bill. Now, the courtroom has heard both Sam's side and Bill's side of what happened, so let's fast forward. What decision do you think will be made in our 1800s courtroom today? Is the contract enforceable? Does Sam have to sell the wagon to Bill even though Sam claims that Bill threatened to beat him up? Let's pause a moment and think about it. Okay, I think that's a long enough pause. If you think the contract is enforceable, you might be right. 1, the disagreement over the sale of the wagon, and 2, Bill allegedly threatening to beat up Sam if Sam refused to sell the wagon are 2 entirely separate issues. And therefore, Sam must sell the wagon to Bill as agreed in the contract, whether or not the contract was signed under duress, coercion, or forcefully signed because of Bill's threats. Now, you might be thinking, but why? How can this be 2 separate issues when it appears that all this talk of violence directly relates back to the sale of the wagon? That might be what you're thinking about right now. Like, how can this be 2 separate issues? And after all, Bill only threatened Sam because Bill wanted to buy Sam's wagon. Well, in the 1800s, regardless of violence, threats of violence, or duress, a court could still enforce a contract that appears legitimate. Generally legitimate. And most likely with the belief that Sam could take separate legal action, if necessary, related to Bill's threats. So in other words, the court may have examined the contract, saw that it met the general requirements of the 1800s to be a sufficiently standard contract, and saw that there was nothing wrong with the contract. And so the only problem the court may have heard was Bill threatening to beat up Sam, and that must be a separate issue. Now you might be thinking again, but how does this make sense? And that's a great question for the 1800s. So let's fast forward to today, shall we? Today, our courts have evolved to take into consideration all sorts of different factors to determine whether an agreement involves duress, coercion, threats, or not. And today, a court is much less likely to enforce an agreement or allow a contract to continue forward if that contract was made under duress, threats, coercion. Nevertheless, some forms of duress, threats, coercion are still completely allowable and acceptable as a way of practice in courts today, based on the governing laws and policies in various practice areas of the law today. So as much as we want to acknowledge that in the 1800s, more obviously our court systems lacked fairness, justice, and equality, we still have a deeply rooted, uneven, and an extremely shaky historical foundation and landscape that continues to impact how our court systems function and operate today. So duress, coercion, threats, acceptable in an 1800s courtroom to a certain extent, and still acceptable today to a certain extent. Except now, primarily, when and if, when it occurs, that would be primarily Monday through Friday during business hours. Yet, and I quote, "This is the best we have." Or is that just what we tell ourselves? And a better question, is this the best we can do? Well, absolutely not. Absolutely not. But we are certainly flawed and imperfect human beings, and hence we could not get it right in the 1800s, and we cannot get it right today. So when we think about how far we've come from the 1800s court system to today's court system, remember that the distance traveled might not be so far in certain situations and circumstances, etc., etc. But also remember that this is subject to wide and different interpretations, both strict and loose interpretations, and also based on debatable notions and politics. Now, let's sprinkle a little bit of inspiration into this video, shall we? It is also clear that the court system has made progress in certain regards. And there are some incredible people, incredible organizations at the forefront and behind the scenes. Now, progress is not perfection, and perfection is not possible. But let's give credit where credit is due. And let's appreciate the push for improvements, the push for accessibility, the push for continuous efforts that are both unsuccessful, meaning not successful, and the efforts that are successful. And why do I add in unsuccessful? Because efforts that are not successful, efforts that have tried and failed, those efforts are also significantly meaningful and often undervalued. And without effort, what is progress? Perhaps failure should be viewed more often as progress and labeled more often as progress. Because in order to fail, there are steps to get to a point that just did not work out the way that we wanted it to, the way that perhaps we believe that it should have, the way that we envisioned or that we imagined it to, or someone else envisioned or imagined it to. But was it the way we needed it to? We as a people? So we should appreciate the efforts that are both unsuccessful and successful in our ongoing, evolving judicial system. And for more education, please subscribe. Have a great day.